Okay, so ito naman si Lolo Ray. Bagong edisyon man to ng pagbabasa natin ng mga batas. Okay, kung napansin nyo, di pa naliligo. Pero gusto ko lang basahin to. Nakita ko kasi itong Republic Act na number 8792, which is yung ah, Electronic Commerce Act, no? Under pa rin ito ng mercantile o ng commercial law. Basahin natin kasi papayawan natin ng konti. Kahit ito lang. Maikli na lang to at napapagod na rin ako magbasa-basa. Basahin lang natin at napapanahon kasi electronic commerce, di ba? Basahin natin yung kanyang declaration of policy. Sabi rito, the state recognizes the vital role of information and communications technology in nation building, the need to create an information-friendly environment which supports and ensures the availability, diversity, and affordability of ICT products and services, the primary responsibility of the private sector in contributing investments and services in telecommunications and information technology. The need to develop with appropriate training programs and institutional policy changes, human resources for the information technology age, a labor force skilled in the use of ICT and a population capable of operating and utilizing electronic appliances and computers. Its obligation to facilitate the transfer and promotion of adaptation technology to ensure network security, connectivity and neutrality, sabi niya, of technology for the national benefit, and the need to marshal, organize, and deploy national information infrastructures comprising in both telecommunications, network, and strategic information services, including their interconnection to the global information networks with the necessary and appropriate legal, financial, diplomatic, and technical framework, systems, and facilities. Okay, ang part 2 niya ay ang electronic commerce in general. So, tignan natin yung section 3, objective. Sabi niya, this act aims to facilitate domestic and international dealings, transactions, arrangements, agreements, contracts, and exchanges and storage of information through the utilization of electronic, optical, and similar medium, mode, instrumentality, and technology to recognize the authenticity and reliability of electronic documents related to such activities and to promote the universal use of electronic transaction in the government and general public. Section 4, Sphere of Application. This act shall apply to any kind of data, message, and electronic document used in the context of commercial and non-commercial activities, to include domestic and international dealings, transactions, arrangements, agreements, contracts, and exchanges and storage of information. Section 5, definition of terms. Okay. Mag-define tayo ng mga terms. Wait lang at pahawa ko na naman to. Yan, okay. Addressee refers to a person who is intended by the originator to receive the electronic data message or electronic document. The term does not include a person acting as an intermediary with respect to that electronic data message or electronic document. Computer refers to any device or apparatus which, by electronic, electromechanical, or magnetic impulse, or by other means, is capable of receiving, recording, transmitting, storing, processing, retrieving, or producing information, data, figures, symbols, or other modes of written expression according to mathematical and logical rules, or of performing any one or more of those functions. Yun ang computer. Okay. Electronic data message refers to information generated, sent, received, or stored by electronic, optical, or similar means. Example nito siguro, Facebook message sa'yo or yung email, yan. Information and communication system refers to a system intended and capable of generating, sending, receiving, storing, or otherwise processing electronic data messages or electronic documents and includes the computer system, or other similar device by or in which data is recorded or stored, and any procedures related to the recording or storage of electronic data message or electronic document. Electronic signature refers to any distinctive mark, characteristic, and or sound in electronic form representing the identity of a person and attached to or logically associated with the electronic data message or electronic document, or any methodology or procedures employed or adopted by a person and executed or adopted by such person with the intention of authenticating or approving an electronic data message or electronic document. Parang pirma rin, di ba? Electronic document refers to information or the representation of information, data, figures, symbols, or other modes of written expression described or however represented, by which a right is established or an obligation extinguished, or by which a fact may be proved and affirmed, which is received, recorded, transmitted, stored, processed, retrieved, or produced electronically. Electronic key refers to a secret code which secures and defends sensitive information that crosses over public channels into a form decipherable only with a matching electronic key. Intermediary refers to a person who, in behalf of another person and with respect to a particular electronic document, sends, receives, and or stores or provides other services in respect of that electronic document. Originator refers to a person by whom or on whose behalf the electronic document purports to have been created, generated, and or sent. The term does not include the person acting as an intermediary with respect to that electronic document. A service provider refers to a provider of online services or network access or the operator of facilities, therefore, including entities offering the transmission, routing, or providing of connections for online communications, digital or otherwise, between or among points specified by user of electronic documents of the user's choosing, or the necessary technical means by which electronic documents of an originator may be stored and may be accessible to a designated or undesignated third party. So, ang service provider, usually, yan yung mga uh, PLDT, internet provider, smart bro, okay, o di naman kaya daw yung mga necessary technical means by which electronic documents of an originator may be stored. Siguro yung mga backup, no? Mga third party, example siguro dito yung mga Google Drive, ganyan. Okay, such providers shall have no authority. Wala silang karapatan to modify or alter the content of the electronic data message or electronic document received, or to make any entry therein in behalf of the originator, addressee, or any third party, unless specifically authorized to do so, and who shall retain the electronic document in accordance with the specific request or as necessary for the purpose of performing the services it was engaged to perform. Magtungo tayo sa Chapter 2, Legal Recognition of Electronic Writing or Document and Data Messages. Data. Yeah. Section 6, Legal Recognition of Data Messages. Information shall not be denied legal effect, validity, or enforceability solely on the grounds that it is in the data message purporting to give rise to such legal effect, or that it is merely referred to in that electronic data message. Okay. So, meron siyang legal effect, no? Nire-recognize na ng batas natin ngayon yun. Section 7, Legal Recognition of Electronic Documents. Electronic documents shall have the legal effect, validity, or enforceability as any other document or legal writing. And, okay, letter A, sabi niya, where the law requires a document to be in writing, that requirement is met by an electronic document if the said electronic document maintains its integrity and reliability and can be authenticated so as to be usable for subsequent reference in that, o di naman, in subsequent reference in that, the electronic document has remained complete and unaltered apart from the addition of any endorsement and any authorized change or any change which arises in the normal course of communication, storage, and display, So, hindi siya altered. And the electronic document is reliable in the light of the purpose for which it was generated and in the light of all relevant circumstances. An example of which is yung pinag-uusapan ngayon na electronic bar exams, yung computerized bar exams. So, kung mapapatunayan naman, base sa preparation kunwari ng Supreme Court na yung itatype kunwari ng mga estudyante na magte-take ng bar exams, talaga namang it is as if it is written and unaltered, no, at talaga nanggaling sa source, it will comply with the requirement of the kumbaga para rin siyang merong legal effect as if it is written. Letter B, ang sabi niya rito, paragraph A, okay, yung binasa natin, applies whether a requirement therein is in form of an obligation or whether the law simply provides consequences for the document not being presented or retained in its original form. Letter C, where the law requires that the document be presented or retained in its original form, that requirement is met by an electronic document if, di ko naman nababasahin, siguro yung scanned copy. Okay? So, tingnan natin. There exists a reliable assurance as to the integrity of the document from the time when it was first generated in its final form. At ikalawa, the document is capable of being displayed to the person to whom it is presented. Okay, parang sa court din yan ina-identify mo yung document. Is this your civil service certificate? Kunwari ganun. That no provision of this act shall apply to vary any and all requirements of existing laws on formalities required in the execution of documents for their validity. For evidentiary purposes naman daw, an electronic document shall be the functional equivalent of a written document under existing laws. So dahil sa batas na to, electronic documents daw shall be the functional equivalent of a written document under existing laws. Okay. Hindi na rin ano. Sabi niya naman dito, this act does not modify any statutory or legal rule relating to the admissibility of electronic data messages or electronic documents except the rules relating to authentication and best evidence. Diba? Usually best evidence yung electronic evidence. Section 8, legal recognition of electronic signatures. An electronic signature on the electronic document shall be equivalent to the signature of a person on a written document if that signature is proved by showing that a prescribed procedure not alterable by the parties interested in the electronic document existed under which letter A, a method is used to identify the party sought to be bound and to indicate said party's access to the electronic document necessary for his consent or approval through the electronic signature. Letter B, said method is reliable and appropriate for the purpose for which the electronic document was generated or communicated in the light of all the circumstances including any relevant agreement. Letter C, it is necessary for the party sought to be bound in order to proceed further with the transaction to have executed or provided the electronic signature. And letter D, the other party is authorized and enabled to verify the electronic signature and to make a decision to proceed with the transaction authenticated by the same. Tungo tayo section 9, presumption relating to electronic signatures. In any proceedings involving an electronic signature, it shall be presumed that, letter A, the electronic signature is the signature of the person to whom it correlates, and letter B, the electronic signature was affixed by that person with the intention of signing or approving the electronic document, unless the person relying on the electronically signed electronic document knows or has notice of defects in or unreliability of the signature or reliance on the electronic signature is not reasonable under the circumstances. Section 10, original documents. Ito, scan to Alam ko, mas madali yung scanned, no? Okay, original documents. Where the law requires information to be presented or retained in its original form, that requirement is met by an electronic data message or electronic document if the integrity of the information from the time when it was first generated in its final form as an electronic data message or electronic document is shown by evidence, aligned or otherwise, and letter B, where it is required that information be presented that the information is capable of being displayed to the person to whom it is to be presented. Ibig sabihin, capable of being displayed, capable of being identified by the person. Pag pinresenta mo sa kanya yon, matutukoy niya na gawa niya yon. Or yun ay kanyang uh, electronic signature. Okay? Sandali ah. Yan natin ibig sabihin. Okay, ano yung legal definition ng aliunde? Sabi rito, wait lang. From a source other than. Okay. Yun ang ibig sabihin ng aliunde. Shown by evidence, aliunde or otherwise. From a source other than. So, pwede ka may reference o may reference na other sources na mapatunayan mo na yung integrity ng electronic data message. Sabi pa rito, section 10 pa rin to ha, paragraph 1 daw, applies whether the requirement is in the form of an obligation or whether the law simply provides consequences for the information not being presented or retained in its original form. For the purposes of subparagraph A of paragraph 1, okay? Subparagraph A of paragraph 1, ano? Saan ako? Wait, nawala ako. For the purposes, ayun. Okay, ayun, no? Yung integrity daw ng information pwedeng pagbasihan sa iba. You can aliunde, sabi niya. For the purposes of subparagraph A or of paragraph 1, sabi niya, the criteria for assessing integrity shall be whether the information has remained complete and unaltered, apart from the addition of any endorsement and any change which arises in the normal course of communication, storage, and display. And letter B, the standard of reliability required shall be assessed in the light of the purpose for which the information was generated and in the light of all relevant circumstances. Section 11 ng Electronic Commerce Act. Authentication of electronic data messages and electronic documents. Until the Supreme Court by appropriate rules shall have so provided, electronic documents, electronic data messages, and electronic signatures shall be authenticated by demonstrating, substantiating, and validating a claimed identity of a user, device, or another entity in an information or communication system, among other ways as follows. Letter A. The electronic signature shall be authenticated by proof that a letter, character, number, or other symbol in electronic form representing the persons named in and attached to or logically associated with an electronic data message, electronic document, or that the appropriate methodology or security procedures, when applicable, were employed or adopted by a person and executed or adopted by such person with the intention of authenticating or approving an electronic data message or electronic document. Letter B, the electronic data message and electronic document shall be authenticated by proof that an appropriate security procedure, when applicable, was adopted and employed for the purpose of verifying the originator of an electronic data message and or electronic document, or in detecting error or alteration in the communication, content, or storage of an electronic document or electronic data message for a specific point, which, using algorithm or codes, identifying words or numbers, encryptions, answers back or acknowledgement procedures, or similar security devices. Sabi pa rito, the Supreme Court may adopt such other authentication procedures, including the use of electronic notarization. Baka pumunta na tayo dyan, no? Systems as necessary, okay, and advisable, as well as a certificate of authentication on printed or hard copies of the electronic document or electronic data messages by electronic notaries, service providers, and other duly recognized or appointed certification authorities. The person seeking to introduce an electronic data message and electronic document in any legal proceeding has the burden of proving its authenticity by evidence capable of supporting a finding that the electronic data message and the electronic document is what the person claims it to be. In the absence of evidence to the contrary, the integrity of the information and communication system in which an electronic data message or electronic document is recorded or stored may be established in any legal proceeding. Letter A, by evidence that all material times the information and communication system or other similar device was operating in a manner that did not affect the integrity of the electronic data message and or electronic document, and there are no other reasonable grounds to doubt the integrity of the information and communication system. Letter B, by showing that the electronic data message and or electronic document was recorded or stored by a party to the proceedings who is adverse in interest to the party using it. And letter C, by showing that the electronic data message or electronic document was recorded or stored in the usual and ordinary course of business by a person who is not a party to the proceedings and who did not act under the control of the party using the record. Section 12, admissibility and evidential weight of electronic data message and electronic documents. Sabi niya, in any legal proceedings, nothing in the application of the rules on evidence shall deny the admissibility of an electronic data message or electronic document evidence. Letter A, on the sole ground that it is in electronic form. Hindi mo siya pwedeng i-deny just because it is in electronic form. And letter B, on the ground that it is not in the standard written form and the electronic data message or electronic document meeting and complying with the requirements under section 6 or 7 hereof shall be the best evidence of the agreement and transaction contained therein. Sabi pa rito, in assessing the evidential weight of an electronic data message or electronic document, the reliability of the manner in which it was generated, stored, or communicated. Okay? Tapos yung reliability of the manner in which its originator was identified, and other relevant factors shall be given due regard. Section 13, retention of electronic data message and electronic document. Notwithstanding any provision of law, rule, or regulation to the contrary, letter A, the requirement in any provision of law that certain documents be retained in their original form is satisfied by retaining them in the form of an electronic data message on electronic document which remains accessible so as to be usable for subsequent reference, o di naman kaya is retained in the format in which it was generated, sent, or received, or in a format which can be demonstrated to accurately represent the electronic data message or electronic document generated, sent, or received. At ikatatlo, enable the identification of its originator and addressee as well as the determination of the date and the time it was sent or received. Letter A pa lang yun, ha? Okay, ng retention of electronic data message and electronic document. Letter B, the requirement referred to in paragraph A is satisfied by using the services of a third party, provided the conditions set forth in subparagraphs 1, 2, and 3 of paragraph A are met. Section 14, proof by affidavit. The matters referred to in Section 12 on admissibility and Section 9 on the presumption of integrity may be presumed to have been established by an affidavit given to the best of the deponent's knowledge, subject to the rights of parties in interest as defined in the following section. Section 15, cross-examination. A deponent of an affidavit referred to in Section 14 that has been introduced in evidence may be cross-examined as of right by a party to the proceedings who is adverse in interest to the party who has introduced the affidavit or has caused the affidavit to be introduced. At ikalawa, pagdating sa cross-examination, any party to the proceedings has the right to cross-examine a person referred to in Section 11, Paragraph 4, Subparagraph C. Doon na tayo sa Chapter 3, Communication of Electronic Data Messages and Electronic Documents. Section 16, Formation and Validity of Electronic Contracts. except as otherwise agreed by the parties. An offer, the acceptance of an offer, and such other elements required under existing laws for the formation of contracts may be expressed in, demonstrated, and proved by means of electronic data message or electronic documents, and no contract shall be denied validity or enforceability on the sole ground that it is in the form of an electronic data message or electronic document, or that any or all of the elements required under existing laws for the formation of the contracts is expressed, demonstrated, and proved by means of electronic documents. Sabi niya pa, okay, para sa formation and validity of electronic contracts, electronic transactions made through networking among banks or linkages thereof with other entities or networks, and vice versa, shall be deemed consummated upon the actual dispensing of cash or the debit of one account and the corresponding credit to another, whether such transaction is initiated by the depositor or by an authorized collecting party, provided that the obligation of one bank, entity, or person similarly situated to another arising therefrom shall be considered absolute and shall not be subjected to the process of preference of credits. Section 17, recognition by parties of electronic data message or electronic document as between the originator and the addressee of an electronic data message or electronic document. A declaration of will or other statement shall not be denied legal effect, validity, or enforceability solely on the ground that it is in the form of an electronic data message. Between the originator, sabi niya, and the addressee. Ako yung gumawa kunwari ng message, pinadala ko sa'yo. O pinadala kitang dokumento. Ako yung originator, ikaw yung addressee. Okay. Hindi daw pwedeng i-deny yung legal effect noon dahil lamang isinend ko sa'yo yun through an electronic data message. Section 18, attribution of electronic data message. An electronic data message or electronic document is that of the originator if it was sent by the originator himself. Kung ako mismo, dokumento ko, in-email ko sa'yo. Kalawa, as between the originator and the addressee, an electronic data message or electronic document is deemed to be that of the originator if it was sent to the addressee by a person who had the authority to act on behalf of the originator with respect to that electronic data message or electronic document, or by an information system programmed by or on behalf of the originator to operate automatically. Ikatatlo, sa attribution of electronic data message. As between the originator and the addressee, an addressee is entitled to regard an electronic data message or electronic document as being that of the originator and to assume, sabi niya, in order to ascertain whether the electronic data message or electronic document was that of the originator, the addressee properly apply the procedure previously agreed to by the originator for that purpose. Yung means of communication nyo is alinsunod sa usapan nyo previously agreed to, and letter B, the electronic data message or electronic document as received by the addressee resulted from the actions of a person whose relationship with the originator or with any agent of the originator enabled that person to gain access to a method used by the originator to identify electronic data messages as his own. Sabi naman dito in paragraph 3, okay, yung between the originator and addressee, sabi, does not apply daw kapag on the time when the addressee has both received notice from the originator that the electronic data message or electronic document is not that of originator and has reasonable time to act accordingly. Tinimbrehan ka na. Ako yung originator, ikaw yung addressee. Tinimbrehan na kita na hindi galing sa akin yung message na yan. So, hindi mag-a-apply doon yung paragraph 3. Huwag mo na ituloy. Tinimbrehan na kita eh. In a case of written paragraph, in case within paragraph 3, subparagraph B, at any time when the addressee, ikaw yon, ikaw yung pagbibigyan ko eh, knew or should have known that it had exercised reasonable care or used any agreed procedure that the electronic data message or electronic document was not that of the originator. Number 5. When an electronic data message or electronic document is that of the originator was deemed to be that of the originator or the addressee is entitled to act on that assumption. Then, as between the originator and the addressee is entitled to regard the electronic data message or electronic document as received as being what the originator intended to send and to act on that assumption. The addressee is not, sabi rito, not so entitled when it knew or should have known that it exercised reasonable care or used any agreed procedure that the transmission resulted in any error in the electronic data message or electronic document received. And number 6. Number 6 ng okay, saan ako? Nawala ako. Ayun. Number 6 ng attribution of electronic data message. Kanino mo ba i-attribute? Sino ba talagang nanggaling? Number 6. The addressee is entitled to regard each electronic data message or electronic document received as a separate electronic data message or electronic document and to act on that assumption except to the extent that it duplicates another electronic data message or electronic document and the addressee knew or should have known that it exercised reasonable care or used any agreed procedure that the electronic data message or electronic document was a duplicate. Okay, section 19, error on electronic data message or electronic document. Sabi dito, the addressee o yung pagdadala ng message, yung rightful na tatanggap na message, is entitled to regard the electronic data message or electronic document as that which the originator intended to send and to act on that assumption unless the addressee knew or should have known had the addressee exercised reasonable care or used the appropriate procedure. So, sabi lang naman dito, entitled yung addressee na umarte siya as if o paniwalaan niya as if yung originator ang nagpadala sa kanya ng message. Okay? Had the addressee exercised reasonable care or used the appropriate procedure, letter A, that the transmission resulted in any error therein or in the electronic document when the electronic data message or electronic documents the designated information system or that electronic data message or electronic document is sent to an information system which is not so designed by the addressee for the purpose. So pwede kayong due diligence lang naman ito sa communication. Yun ang nakikita ko rito. Okay, section 20, sabi niya rito, the following rules shall apply where on or before sending an electronic data message or electronic document, the originator and the addressee have agreed, nagkasundo na kayo, or in that electronic document or electronic data message, the originator has requested that receipt of the electronic document or electronic data message be acknowledged. Ay mahalaga yung acknowledgement na okay, natanggap mo. Letter A, where the originator has not agreed with the addressee that the acknowledgement be given in a particular form. Okay, any form of acknowledgement daw okay lang. Or otherwise, any conduct of the addressee is sufficient to indicate that the electronic data message or document has been received. Susunod, where the originator has stated that the effect or significance of the data message or electronic document is conditional on the receipt and acknowledgement thereof. Okay, the electronic data message is treated as though it was never been sent until the acknowledgement is received. Diba? At pangatlo, where the originator has not stated that the effect or significance of the electronic data message or electronic document is conditional on receipt of the acknowledgement and the acknowledgement has not been received by the originator within the time specified or agreed of. If no time has been specified or agreed with reasonable time, the originator may give notice to the addressee stating that no acknowledgement has been received. Uy, hindi mo pa ina-acknowledge yung padala ko. The originator may notice to the addressee treat the electronic document or electronic data message as though it had never been sent or exercise any other rights as it may have. Ito naman, Section 21. Section 21, time of dispatch of electronic data messages or electronic documents. Unless otherwise agreed between the originator and the addressee, the dispatch of an electronic data message or electronic document occurs when it enters an information system outside the control of the originator or of the person who sent the electronic data message or electronic document on behalf of the origination. Okay. Matatawag na dispatch yun pag kunwari lumabas na. Siguro ang pwede nga bigyan ng example dyan, ako yung originator, ipipm kita sa messenger. Tapos na-post ko yun as status. Siguro dispatch na yun, no? Kasi it enters an information system outside the control of the originator. Hindi pa rin pala kasi within the control of originator yun eh. Okay, section 22, time of receipt of electronic data messages or electronic documents. Unless otherwise agreed upon daw by the originator and the addressee, ganito yung the time of receipt of an electronic data message or electronic document is as follows. Tatlo yan. If the addressee has designated an information system for the purpose of receiving electronic data or electronic document, receipt occurs at the time when the electronic data message or electronic document enters the designated information system. Mari, nag-enter na siya sa messenger mo or sa email mo. Okay. Letter B, if the electronic data message or electronic document is sent to an information system to the addressee that is not the designated information system, receipt occurs at the time when the electronic data is retrieved by the addressee. Kunwari, uy, usapan natin sa messenger mo isi-send, kaso sa email pala. Check mo yung email mo, na-retrieve niya na. Okay. So, receive. Yun yung time ng kanyang pagkaka-receive. Letter C, if the addressee has not designated an information system, receipt occurs when the electronic data message or electronic document enters an information system of the addressee. These rules apply notwithstanding that the place where the information system is located may be different from the place where the electronic data message or electronic document is deemed to be received. Okay? Section 23, sabi rito, unless otherwise agreed between the originator and the addressee, an electronic data message or electronic document is deemed to be dispatched at the place where the originator has its place of business and received at the place where the addressee has its place of business. These rules shall apply even if the originator or addressee had used a laptop or other portable device to transmit or receive his electronic data message or electronic document. This rule, ito mahalaga to, this rule shall also apply to determine the tax situs or yung location ng tax of such transaction. Place of dispatch daw is deemed to be their place of business. For the purposes hereof, sabi niya, if the originator or the addressee has more than one place of business, the place of business is that which has the closest relationship to the underlying transaction, or where there is no underlying transaction, the principal place of business. Kahit marami ka pang place of business, meron kang principal place of business. If the originator naman of the addressee does not have a place of business, reference is to be made to its habitual residence. Kunwari ako, wala akong principal place of business sa aking habitual residence. At ikatatlo, the usual place of residence in relation to a body corporate means the place where it is incorporated or otherwise legally constituted. Section 24, choice of security methods. Subject to applicable laws and or rules and guidelines promulgated by the Department of Trade and Industry with other appropriate government agencies, parties to an electronic transaction shall be free to determine the type and level of electronic data message and electronic document security needed and to select and use or implement appropriate technological methods that suit their needs. Okay. Okay, nasa part 3 na tayo, no? 25. Okay. 10 provision na lang. Pero mahaba-haba. Pero be-break lang ako at mamaya babalikan natin yan, ha? Okay. Okay. Papahinga na dapat ako. Napasubo pa ako rito sa Electronic Commerce Act, no? Di bali, maganda naman to kasi napapanahon. Ah. So, basahin na natin Part 3, Electronic Commerce in Specific Areas. Okay, sa carriage of goods. Okay. Section 25, Actions related to contracts of carriage of goods. Without derogating from the provisions of Part 2 of this law, this chapter applies to any action in connection with or in pursuance of a contract of carriage of goods, including but not limited to letter A, furnishing the marks, number, quantity, or weight of goods, stating or declaring the nature or value of goods, issuing a receipt of goods, confirming that goods have been loaded. Letter B, notifying a person of terms and conditions of the contract, giving instructions to a carrier. Letter C, claiming delivery of goods, authorizing release of goods, giving notice of loss of or damage of goods. Letter D, giving any other notice or statement in connection with the performance of the contract. Letter E, undertaking to deliver goods to a named person or persons. Letter F, granting, acquiring, renouncing, surrendering, transferring, or negotiating rights in goods. And letter G, acquiring or transferring rights and obligations under the contract. Okay, section 26. So, taga lang, nabasa natin kani-kanina lang yung carriage of goods. So, siguro yung mga issuing ng receipt, confirmation. Diba sabi yung bill of lading is a confirmation that the goods have been received, diba, by the carrier. At ganoon din naman, pagka inisyuhan na ng carrier si shipper na ng bill of lading is naikarga na ang kanyang mga goods, diba, to be shipped. So, pwede rin pala ang mga electronic communication, no? Para mag-issue ng resibo, it's as if it is a receipt, confirmation, and notification, no? Giving instructions, authorizing release, di ba? Okay, magtungo na tayo sa Section 26, Transport Documents. Where the law requires that any action referred to contract of carriage of goods be carried out in writing or by using a paper document, that requirement is met if the action is carried out by using one or more data messages or electronic documents. Paragraph 1, okay? Yung una natin, kakasabi lang natin, applies whether the requirement therein is in form of an obligation or whether the law simply provides consequences for failing either to carry out the action in writing or to use a paper document. Number 3, if a right is to be granted to or an obligation is to be acquired by one person and no other person, and if the law requires that in order to effect this, the right or obligation must be conveyed to that person by the transfer or use of a paper document, okay? That requirement is met if the right or obligation is conveyed by using one or more electronic data messages or electronic documents unique. Okay, ika-4. Okay, dito pa rin tayo sa actions related to contracts of carriage of goods. Sabi niya, for the purposes of paragraph 3, the standard of reliability required shall be assessed in the light of the purpose for which the right or obligation was conveyed and in the light of all circumstances, including any relevant agreement. Number 5, where one or more data messages are used to effect any action in subparagraphs F and G, okay, of section 25, no, yung granting, acquiring, renouncing, surrendering, transferring, or negotiating rights in goods, acquiring or transferring rights and obligations under contract. Kaso marami kang ginamit na ano. Sabi niya, one or more data messages ang ginamit mo to effect yung mga nabanggit ko. Sabi niya, no paper document used to effect any such action is valid unless the use of electronic data message or electronic document has been terminated and replaced by the use of paper documents. So, kailangan, kunwari, nag-stop na yung transaction mo at a certain ganito, okay, unless terminate mo na daw. Okay, after nung sinabi ko to, I will then present the paper document. Pero kung yung paper document mo conflicts with your electronic message, hindi hindi tatanggapin yung paper message mo. A paper document issued in these circumstances shall contain a statement of such termination, sabi niya. The replacement of electronic data messages or electronic documents by paper documents shall not affect the rights or obligations of the parties involved. Number 6, if a rule of law is compulsorily applicable to a contract of carriage of goods, which is in or is evidenced by a paper document, that rule shall not be inapplicable to such a contract of carriage of goods, which is evidenced by one or more electronic data messages or electronic documents by reason of the fact that the contract is evidenced by such electronic data messages or electronic documents instead of by a paper document. Okay, Part 4, Electronic Transactions in Government. Section 27, Government Use of Electronic Data Messages, Electronic Documents, and Electronic Signatures. Notwithstanding any law to the contrary, within 2 years from the date of the effectivity of this Act, all departments, bureaus, offices, and agencies of the government, as well as GOCCs, that pursuant to law require or accept the filing of documents, require that documents be created or retained and or submitted, issue permits, licenses, or certificates of registration or approval, or provide for the method and manner of payment or settlement of fees and other obligations to the government shall, letter A, accept the creation and filing or retention of such documents in the form of electronic data messages or electronic documents. Kaya ano na, 'di ba, na even sa titulo ng lupa, nanghihingi na sila ng karagdagang bayad para sa e-titling, 'di ba? Even yung pangunguha ng NBI, siguro may 1 taon na rin siya na online, 'di ba? Letter B, issue permits, licenses, or approval in the form of electronic data messages or electronic documents. Letter C, require and or accept payments and issue receipts acknowledging such payments through systems using electronic data messages or electronic documents. Or letter D, transact the government business and or perform governmental functions using electronic data messages or electronic documents, and for the purpose are authorized to adopt and promulgate after appropriate public hearing and with due publication in newspapers of general circulation the appropriate rules, regulations, or guidelines to, among others, specify the manner and format in which such electronic data messages or electronic documents shall be filed, created, retained, or issued, where and when such electronic data messages or electronic documents have to be signed, the use of electronic signature, the type of electronic signature required, the format of an electronic data message or electronic document, and the manner the electronic signature shall be affixed to the electronic data message or electronic document, the control process and procedures as appropriate to ensure adequate integrity, security, and confidentiality of electronic data messages or electronic documents or records or payments, other attributes required of electronic data messages or electronic documents or payments, and number 6, the full or limited use of the documents and papers for compliance with the government requirements, provided that this act shall by itself mandate any department of the government, organ of state, or statutory corporation to accept or issue any document in the form of electronic data or electronic documents upon the adoption, promulgation, and publication of the appropriate rules, regulations, or guidelines. Section 28, no? Haba nito, sabi niya, oh. RPWEB or RPWeb. To promote the use of electronic documents and electronic data messages in government and to the general public. Sabi rito, within 2 years from the effectivity of this act, there shall be installed an electronic online network in accordance with Administrative Order 332 and House of Representatives Resolution 890, otherwise known as RPWeb, Republic of the Philippines Web, to implement Part 4 of this Act to facilitate the open, speedy, and efficient electronic online transmissions, conveyance, and use of electronic data messages or electronic documents amongst all government departments, agencies, bureaus, offices, down to the division level and to the regional and provincial offices as practicable as possible. Government-owned and controlled corporations, local government units, other public instrumentalities, universities, colleges, and other schools and universal access to the general public. Kaya bago ko gawin itong live na ito, di ba, kung marirealize nyo, marami ng lugar sa Maynila ang mayroong wifi, di ba? Unti-unti, di ba? The RP Web Network shall serve as initial platform of the government information infrastructure to facilitate the electronic online transmission and conveyance of government services, to evolve and improve by better technologies or kinds of electronic online wide area networks, utilizing but not limited to fiber optic, wow, satellite, wireless, and other broadband telecommunication mediums or modes, to facilitate the rapid development of the government information infrastructure or yung GII. The Department of Transportation and Communications, National Telecommunications Commission, and the National Computer Center are hereby directed, tatlong ahensya yun to aggressively promote and implement a policy environment and regulatory or non-regulatory framework that shall lead to the substantial reduction of costs of including but not limited to lease lines. Naku, yan yung mga mahihirap, no? Land. Yan. Siguro yung mga right of way. Yeah. Satellite and dial-up telephone access, cheap broadband and wireless accessibility by government departments, agencies, bureaus, offices, government-owned and controlled corporations, local government units, other public instrumentalities, and the general public, to include the establishment of a government website portal and a domestic internet exchange system to facilitate strategic access to the government and amongst agencies thereof and the general public, and for the speedier flow of locally generated internet traffic within the Philippines. The physical infrastructure of cable and wireless systems for cable TV and broadcast, excluding programming and content, and the management thereof shall be considered as within the activity of telecommunications for purpose of electronic commerce and to maximize the convergence of ICT in the installation of the government information infrastructure. Section 29, magtungo tayo. Authority of the Department of Trade and Industry and participating entities. The DTI shall direct and supervise the promotion and development of electronic commerce in the country with relevant government agencies without prejudice to the provisions of RA 7653, which is yung charter of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Hindi niya dapat maharangan yung charter ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and RA 337, which is the General Banking Act. Okay. Among others, the DTI is empowered to promulgate rules and regulations alinsunod sa batas na ito, as well as provide quality standards or issue certifications as the case may be. They are also empowered, DTI is also empowered to perform such other functions as may be necessary for the implementation of this act in the area of electronic commerce to include, but shall not be limited to, the installation of an online public information and quality and price monitoring system for goods and services aimed in protecting the interests of the consuming public, availing of the advantages of this act. Tignan na lang natin yung mga final provisions. Section 30, sabi niya, no person or party shall be subject of any civil or criminal liability in respect of the electronic data message or electronic document for which the person or party acting as a service provider, okay, provided in Section 5 merely provides access if such liability is founded on. Kung yung liability is founded on the obligations and liabilities of the parties under the electronic data message or electronic document, hindi liable sa service provider. O di naman kaya, the making, publication, dissemination, or distribution of such material, any statement made in such material, including possible infringement of any rights subsisting in or in relation to such material, okay, provided that yung service provider does not have actual knowledge dun sa mga unlawful infringements. O di naman kaya, the service provider does not knowingly receive a financial benefit directly attributable to the unlawful or infringing activity, or the service provider does not directly commit any infringement or other unlawful act and does not induce or cause another person or party to commit any infringement. So wala siyang liable pagka ganon. Okay. So nothing in this section shall affect any obligation on founded contract. Hindi siya maapektuhan kasi dati na siyang kontrata. The obligation of a service provider as such under a licensing or other regulatory regime, it will not be affected then. Any obligation imposed under written law, hindi siya apektado ng batas na ito. At hindi rin apektado yung civil liability of any party to the extent that such liability forms the basis for injunctive relief issued by a court under any law requiring that the service provider take or refrain from actions necessary to remove, block, or deny access to any material or to preserve evidence of a violation of law. Okay. Section 31, yung lawful access. Access to an electronic file or an electronic signature of an electronic data message or electronic document shall only be authorized and enforced in favor of the individual or entity having a legal right to the possession of the use of the plain text electronic signature or file and solely for the authorized purposes. Section 32, obligation of confidentiality. Sabi any person who obtained access to an electronic key, electronic data message, or electronic document, book, register, correspondence, information, o kahit na ano para ng material pursuant to any powers conferred under this act shall not convey or shall not transfer or share the same with other person. Ano naman yung mga penalties? Section 33. Okay. Sabi rito, hacking or cracking, which refers to unauthorized access into an interface in a computer system or server or information and communication system, or any access in order to corrupt, alter, steal, or destroy using a computer or other similar information without the knowledge and consent of the owner. Sabi rito, shall be punished by a minimum fine of 100,000 pesos. Sus Mariosep. 100,000 pesos ang minimum fine ng hacking or cracking, and a maximum commensurate to the damage incurred, and a mandatory imprisonment of 6 months to 3 years. So kung ang damage, sa minimum niya ay 100,000 pag nag-hacking ka. Kung ang na-damage mo, itinakda ng korte na 100 million. Yun ang commensurate to the damage na nagawa mo. So sus Mariose, pwede ka magbayad ng pagkalaki-laking halaga. Wala siyang ipinataw dito na maximum na hindi lalagpas. And a mandatory imprisonment of 6 months to 3 years. Okay. Ano pa ba yung unauthorized na gawain na pwedeng parusahan, no? May penalty. Piracy or the unauthorized copying, reproduction, sabi niya rito, shall be punished by a minimum fine of 100,000 pesos and maximum commensurate to the damage incurred, sabi rin. And mandatory imprisonment of 6 years to 3 years, ganun din. Ito, violations of Consumer Act or Republic Act number 7394 and other relevant or pertinent laws through transactions covered by or using electronic data messages shall be penalized with the same penalty provided sa batas na yan. And letter D, other violations of the provisions of this act shall be penalized with a maximum penalty of 1 million. Meron naman pala. Or 6 years imprisonment. So, yun ang maximum niya pala. 1 million. Okay. So, ang kanyang implementing rules and regulations ay ang DTI, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, okay? Department of Transportation and Communications, National Telecommunications Commission, National Computer Center, National Information Technology Council, Commission on Audit, and other concerned agencies and the private sector, no? Kasama sila sa pag-iimplementa nito. Oversight Committee, yung Congressional Oversight Committee composed of the Committees on Trade and Industry, Science and Technology, Finance and Appropriations of both the Senate and House of Representatives. Okay, they shall meet at least every quarter of the first 2 years and every semester for the third year after the approval of this act to oversee its implementation. Parang ang konti, no? Every quarter of the first 2 years, no? Tapos every semester na lang for the third year. Kulang ang time ng mga matatamad nating mambabatas. Charot. Okay. Kasama rin sila. Siyempre, may pondo sila sa General Appropriations Act. Okay. Okay. Okay na yan. So, doon po nagtatapos, no? Panahon pala ni Erap ito, no? Signed by President Erap Estrada, no? So, doon po nagtatapos, no? Itong Republic Act 8792, the Electronic Commerce Act of 2000. So, sana nag-enjoy kayo, no? At napapanahon ito na, lalo na COVID, napilitan tayo na marami, through electronic data messages na. So, mag-pray na muna tayo. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. At God bless sa inyong lahat. Sana next time, samahan nyo na naman ako. Gaya ng lagi ko sinasabi, sa pagbabasa. At subukan nating i-interpret ang mga batas in layman's term para maintindihan natin. At bukod doon, pag natapos ko ang pagbabasa ng mga batas, nagsawa na ako sa batas. Kasi pagkatapos ng commercial law, yung criminal code naman yung revised penal code. Sa iba pang batas, babasahin natin yan. Pag naubos ko na lahat ng mga bar subjects, yung kumbaga yung anong tawag rito, yung framework o yung foundation ng mga batas sa Pilipinas, sa tapos ko nang basahin at i-interpret, malay mo, magbasa naman ako ng para sa mga doktor. So, kung meron kayong kaalaman kung ano ba yung binabasang aklat ng mga doktor, i-comment nyo lang sa akin or i-PM nyo sa akin. So, God bless you and good night.